Welcome to Lessons Learned. I'm Sherry, and today we're going to be talking about hanging sleeves. What's a hanging sleeve? Why do we need a hanging sleeve? And how do you make a hanging sleeve for your quilt? So a hanging sleeve is to be able to obviously hang your quilt up in some fashion. Many quilt shows require a certain type of hanging sleeve for our quilts. So if you guys remember back when I was making the Happy Days quilt, which is a Stitch in Heaven block of the month that I did last year. Actually, I think it was a 2023 block of the month, but I did finish the quilt last year mostly, and then just recently I finished binding it. But I decided I wanted to put it into the Kentucky State Fair among another. There's two quilts really that I want to put in the fair. This is the one I'm working on first. So I had to learn how to make a hanging sleeve. Well, if you're going to enter your quilt into any sort of exhibition, there's usually a lot of rules you have to follow. And one of those rules is how to make the hanging sleeve. And that's for the purpose of making everything seamless throughout the whole quilt exhibition. Everything hangs correctly and fits correctly where they're hung and so forth. So in the directions that I got after I entered my quilts into the exhibition for the Kentucky State Fair, I read down through there and saw that they wanted you to go to American Quilt Society's instructions for a quilt hanger. I happen to be a member of the American Quilt Society, and if you go to their website, AmericanQuilter.com, right on the first page it says that they are the world's largest quilting membership organization. So if you are a serious quilter, you should seriously be a member of this organization. There's lots of cool things on the site. You get 6 magazines per year, you get free patterns, you get notices on sales, discounts at certain quilt shops, things of that sort. There's a lot of information there. Even some classes that you could take. Sometimes you have to pay a little bit extra for the class, but you'll pay less than just someone coming in that's not a member. So there's a lot of stuff there you can look at on the site, AmericanQuilter.com. I will put a link in the description box for the website and also for the information I found on hanging sleeves for quilts. So I searched that out and I went on to the, let's see, I believe I went to shows and contests, and there it shows all of the big shows that are coming up. Now this is the show that takes place in Paducah, Kentucky every year, and then they have other locations throughout the United States. I don't know if they have any outside of the United States, although it is a worldwide site or club, if you will, that you can become a member of. Quilt contest is where I went, and from the quilt contest, some of the frequently asked questions was hanging sleeve requirements. So I just clicked on that hanging sleeve requirements and up they popped. So you have a step-by-step instructions for adding a new sleeve to a quilt, and all of the measurements, some illustrations, some photos, and there's also a video by Bonnie Browning, who is the face of AQS, actually doing it on a video. It's a short video, not all of the details are there, but with her video and the step-by-step instructions, anyone should be able to make the hanging sleeve that they need. I'm actually going to make one today, so if I speak your quilting language and you can learn from me how to make a quilt sleeve, a hanging sleeve, then continue watching this video, because that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing that I needed to do was find a piece of fabric that was the same as my backing if possible. It doesn't have to be the same as your backing, but I happen to have some of that. So I went ahead and cut a piece the length and the width that I needed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside the house here where Mark does his videos, and I'm going to use the poles of the long arm to lay the back of my quilt out and stitch on my hanging sleeve once I get it sewn up. But I will show you the sewing part of that as well. So let's go inside and get busy and get a quilt sleeve, a hanging sleeve on that quilt so we can get it in the fair this year. So I'm sitting here on the back side of the long arm where the table part is. Okay, so this is a really good work area. It's another perk to having a long arm is the fact that you have this big work surface back here you can use. And I'm sitting in a chair, so I could sit back here and sew, measure, whatever I need to do. So the first thing you have to do, as I was speaking of earlier, is you have to find some fabric to make your sleeve out of. It does not have to be the same as your backing. Ideally it would be. That way it would just kind of melt into the back. You wouldn't really notice it. So you need to get a piece of fabric that's as long as your quilt is wide. And that includes from the outside of the binding all the way to the other outside of the binding. So mine is 90. So I had to find something that was 90 inches long or piece 90 inches. You could piece it. I happen to have a bunch of yardage because when they sent me the backing for this quilt along, they sent a whole bunch of yardage, and once I made my backing I had these really long solid strips that I didn't have to piece. So that was fortunate for me, but you need to make it as wide as your quilt is and then 8.5 inches deep here. So to get this had a selvage side on it, so I just ripped the selvage off all the way down, and I knew that was a good starting point for that side. So I just measured up 8.5 inches and made another little clip and ripped again all the way down. And that way I didn't have to go across through there and fold this multiple times and use a cutter and a ruler to do it. So that was easiest for me. It does make a lot of raveling. You have to clean up afterwards, but it is overall quicker to do it that way. So the first thing we're going to do is finish off these edges right here. So it says to take in 1/4 inch, fold in 1/4 inch, and then fold in 1/4 inch again. And it said scant 1/4 inch. So that's because more than likely the width of your binding is going to be about that same distance, and that way your sleeve will land, the open end of your sleeve will land right next to the binding and not off of your quilt where you might see it on the front, which would not be good. So here's the front of my quilt, here's the back of my quilt. I measured 90 across, cut my 90 piece, made it 8.5 inches deep, and then I'm going to sew up the edges of this. So fold in once, scant 1/4 inch, and fold in another scant 1/4 inch, and then just sew it down. Let me do that and I'll show you what that looks like. I've just pressed twice, rolled it in towards the wrong side twice. I put a little pin in there, and then this will be my finished edge. So I'll do my scant 1/4 inch right there. But before I sew that, I'm just going to go ahead and double check and make sure that that's not going to be over the edges of my binding. So let me check this. Okay, so mine looks a little bit too long, like by about 1 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment. Let me cut off about 1 inch. I have a little, I'll just use my pin I put in here. And then I'll get a little snip and snip that off and redo it. Okay, let's see if I have it this time. It was a good thing that I checked that. I'm just going to put that folded edge right, and I have my right side up. Stretch it across here and make sure it doesn't go over the edge of my quilt. or the edge of my binding. Okay, that seems to be just right. Sure, I've got it flat here. Okay. So the next step is to go ahead and sew these edges down. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I have that turned over twice and stitched a scant 1/4 inch over. So did that on both ends. Now we need to do some ironing, and I have lots of ravelings from ripping that fabric. That's the only bad thing about that. They just keep coming. So what you want to do is fold this over like this. You're making it meet. Let me do this right here. What you're doing is you're making it meet in the middle, and you're going to iron down some creases on the long ends. So you have these meet right, have them touch each other exactly evenly, and you can use a ruler to do that if you need to. I'm thinking about just eyeballing it. So that's what I need to do first. I need to put some hard creases in both of these long ends. So let me get the iron and I'll do that, and then I'll show you the next step. Here in the instructions, if you don't want to eyeball it, just fold it in half and make a crease in the center first, and then make your two long ends meet in the center, and then make those hard presses on each side. So you could do that like this. I've just got it folded exactly in half, and then when you go to do your individual sides, then there's that press mark right there. So you would bring this one in to it like this and go all the way down, and then come back and do the other side all the way down. And don't worry about that middle one that you just did coming out, because you won't need it anymore. So you're just making some hard press creases here on each side, and then we're going to flip it inside out and sew these two seams together. And what that does is it gives a little bit more of room on that front side, and you'll see what I mean when I get done. So let me finish ironing this. Okay, so I've finished my pressing. So this is what it should look like. These are just touching each other, and then this will be the wrong side of your sleeve that will be down on your back of your quilt, and this will be the front side. So Bonnie Browning said in her video that right now you could just actually, if you don't want to fool with turning this, you can just go ahead and sew it with the wrong sides together and then press it open. It's going to be down on the back side, so it's not going to be seen. But if you do want to go ahead and open it and put your right sides together and make your 1/4 inch seam to close this up, all you have to do is make that seam and then turn your tube. Now by the time you turn the tube, you may have lost some of the visibility of your pressing you just did. So that's a disadvantage of doing it this way. But I feel like it might just be wrong to put wrong sides together. So I'm going to go ahead and sew mine right sides together and turn the tube. Okay, so I sewed my long seam. I sewed them right sides together, and I turned my tube. If you don't know how to turn a tube, this is a pretty big tube. You can actually put your whole hand in it nearly. so it's easy to turn it inside out. But if you still have trouble, get a large safety pin and pin to maybe where that seam is right there, and then feed it through, feeling for the pin. So what happened is once I turned that out, I still felt my edges that I had ironed down. They're still there, although they're faint. But see, my sleeve is wanting to lay flat, and that's from putting the two sides together in the middle. So all I have to do now is I'm going to give this another good press, and I may even use some starch on it just to kind of make it nice and crunchy. No, I don't know. I don't know if it's necessary or not. Probably not. But I'd kind of like to have a nice crisp edge to do my hand sewing with, because to get it on the quilt, I'm going to have to do hand sewing up and down both sides of this hanging sleeve. And that'll be our next step. So let me get over there with this, and we'll start pinning it on and then start doing some of our slip stitching it on to the quilt. Okay, so I have that last step done. Now I'm going through and pinning a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch to the edge of the quilt. So I did wind up with about a 1/4 inch short on each end between the binding and the sleeve, but I think that's okay. I'll just leave it evenly all the way across, and then we're going to slip stitch down the top edge and the bottom edge. But first I'm going to go ahead and do this pinning every, I don't know, 6 inches or so is probably enough for a pin. Yeah, I think that'll work nicely, that many pins. And then the next step is to sew it down. Since this is a long span of hand sewing, I want to load up several needles. I have this little quilt dome from Clover, and I use this to do my hand bindings with. You just load up a whole bunch of needles and you twist the thread to the inside, and then as you need one, you just pull one out. It's pretty nifty, actually. So I need to load this up. Probably need to, I don't know, probably need about 6 needles, I'd say. Have your needle all threaded. I just go ahead and double the thread. I'll sew with a single, but I'll double it up to put it in this little thing here. So you just bring it over to this edge where there's a notch all the way through right there. So you stick it in an empty spot, and then stick your thread in there, and then turn it, and it'll feed your thread to the inside where it won't get messed up. And it's in there until you pull it out. So I have some more empty needles here. I'm gonna go ahead and fill up as well. Let's see, there's one. So once you get started here, make sure you start out with a really tough knot. Knot your thread and then go in and out, in and out, in and out many times, because the weight of your quilt will depend on this knot right here. So I'm just putting my thread through until I can't get it through anymore hardly. So now I can just whip stitch. So I just take a few small whip stitches at first, and that's just where you just kind of glide along the top of the edge of your sleeve here, just barely catching a little bit of it. Just grab a little bit of your quilt and the little edge of your sleeve and keep going. Just make your stitches, I would probably make mine at least a 1/4 inch long. You could possibly go a little bit longer than that. You can't see what I'm doing because this fabric is so busy, but I'm basically the action is for a slip stitch, or it's called something else too, but you just take your needle, or your needle perpendicular, grab your quilt, grab the very edge of that fold on your sleeve and pull through, and then move over and do it again, and you'll just get the hang of it if you're not used to doing a lot of hand sewing. I don't actually do a lot of hand sewing, but I've just done it for so many years that it's pretty easy to get going down through here at a good clip, and before you know it, you are done. So I'm going to go down my top edge, and then I'm going to finish up around on the bottom edge, and we'll be done. There should be a little bit extra fabric. If you feel a little fullness, that's normal, because this front edge, because of the way you sewed that long seam, gives a little more room in here for the rod that they put through it. I've sewn across here and across the bottom with my slip stitch. You might be able to see it a little bit right through here. It's a black thread. I don't know, it's very hard to see on this fabric, but I don't have it sewn all the way across yet. In the interest of time, I'm just wanting to show you basically how it goes on. I was looking for some sort of rod material to stick in here so you can see the space that you really have. I have this ironing bar and I think it kind of will tell the story of how this works. So as you hold it up, you've got the space there for the bar, and the bar goes all the way across and makes your quilt hang neatly from the front. I'm not sure how it's going to actually be. I don't know what kind of bars they use. I'm not sure. First time for me. So, but you can see how you're going to be able to see the binding all the way at the top from where it's hanging, and there's plenty of room for it in there. So just about any size of bar or spool that I can imagine will fit easily in there and not distort the front of your quilt at all. So I'm going to continue on sewing on this in my spare time, but for now I'm going to close out this video, and we'll talk a little bit more about entering your quilts into an exhibition. So that was the first time I had ever put a quilt sleeve on for the purpose of a quilt exhibit. So hopefully I got all of those instructions correct, and it feels right, it looks right, so I'm hoping that I'm okay with that. A couple of things I didn't mention during the sewing and demo part of that is that back end piece. You're going to want to slip stitch down that as well, so that they don't stick the pole between your quilt and the back of the sleeve, but rather inside the sleeve. And another thing that Bonnie Browning mentioned in her video was if you have an extra wide quilt, then you could split it in 2 or 3 sections and have multiple sleeves going across instead of one long one, since that's kind of cumbersome to work with as you're attaching it, which I think is a good idea. She did say don't leave any more than 1 inch between each sleeve section. But I stuck with the long one since this is my first time putting my quilt in the state fair and in an official exhibit like that. I just went ahead and did a long one just in case. So I hope at some point in your quilt life that you feel like you have a quilt that might be worthy of showing it to the world and putting it in a quilt exhibit, a state fair, a quilt competition, whatever the case may be. And now you know how to put a sleeve on so that it can be shown. If you have any questions about this, you can leave your questions in the comments. I'll try to answer as best I can, and I'll also leave those American Quilters Society links in the description box so that you can consult those as well. All right. great. We'll see you soon. Bye.